operating system that's looking at productivity or efficiency or is about managing people around their expertise, what if those expertise are no longer as valuable? What if the timeline of a skill or the relevancy of the way we do something, a process, is now so short rather than multiple generations or decades to now being, years or even months? We need a different operating system.
Welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Ross Thornley, who's an author, keynote speaker on adaptability and the future of work, and co-founder AQai, the world's largest community of adaptability certified coaches, and he's also host of the Decoding AQ podcast. Ross shares his research on adaptability across 2,000 organizations in mapping employee adaptability and how to use science-backed people data to drive innovation, DEI, and retention. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Ross, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chris.
Nice to see you. I've got a really serious question to start us off. Have you actually read all those books behind you?
I've listened to most of them.
Oh, okay.
So the combination is I love Audible,
Okay.
not so much on the physical book, but I like having the physical books.
Before we go any further, tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and your journey to where we are now.
Yeah, sure, Chris. So I've been an entrepreneur for about 25 years. My journey's been, really interesting. I started off at school, I always wanted to do graphic design. That was my thing. And I remember at school, when you have your work experience, there wasn't any work experience for graphic design. That wasn't one of the lists on the
what do you
career
do?
thing. And so at the time, I looked through the yellow pages, which for those in the UK will know what that is, but a great big fat document of company listings, and found a design studio to go and do it. And I contacted them and got set up. So my career started, and I call it Ross 1.0, in kind of graphic design, brand communications. And I just loved the idea of interaction, of communication, design, and people. That really excited me. And builders agree different things, what gets approved, what doesn't get approved, and saw that transition over nearly 18 years. I ran that business from a lot of print to then new media.
So you also had to innovate and go through your
100%.
own transformation.
Yeah, both personally and myself, from being a designer to then realizing, hey, I'm perhaps not the best designer, and employing other people, letting go, becoming a leader, becoming a business owner. And I needed help with that. I needed to, learn out loud in the real life, but also go and study and be around other peers. And I remember talking to you when we met before, but joining and getting a coach. I joined Strategic Coach and Dan Sullivan, and that transformed my own career in terms of building a business that was self-managing.
Tell everyone a bit more about the book then. Who's this book aimed at? What was the inspiration behind it?
We're now in a different world called the exponential world, right? Everything's moving so quickly and so fast. So how do we navigate that? We need a different operating system. Where prior we had an operating system that was all around lean, productivity, efficiency, management of people, and management of projects. When things shift and we're living in a VUCA world, it's far more volatile, it's far more complex, it's far more ambiguous, it's uncertain, all of those things. An operating system that's looking at productivity or efficiency or is about managing people around their expertise, what if those expertise are no longer as valuable? What if the timeline of a skill or the relevancy of the way we do something, a process, is now so short rather than multiple generations or decades to now being, years or even months? We need a different operating system. So this book is aimed really at the curious leaders wanting to figure out, how do we leverage this whole subject of adaptability in humans to ensure that we aren't just surviving, aren't just coping, but can thrive irrelevant of what the event is, rather than, when I get there or when this happens, then I'll be happy, then I'll thrive. When I suss generative AI or when I suss this particular piece, is actually to have peace in uncertainty.
Yeah.
to be able to live in a paradox, to be able to have this element of uncertainty and still be comfortable in our own skin, to be able to understand foresight mapping, to be able to understand experimentation and the shift, as I talk about it in there, from a knowledge economy where it was all about knowing the answers to imagination economy, where it's much more about the questions and about experimentation and how quickly we can get those feedback loops in to learn.
Love
so it's
that.
aimed at those leaders who want to, in essence, harness what the key skills are that are required for humans to be able to be valuable, thriving, and productive in the future.
Yeah, we should probably ask talk about what is AQ for people that aren't aware.
Yeah. So AQ, who needs another one of these Qs, right?
I know we've got a lot of these.
EQ, social quotient, all of these different bits, right? And I've been a big fan of people analytics. Even when I was employing teams, we would run a lot of these to try and understand our people and how to harness their best potential, right? So AQ stands for adaptability quotient. So it's our intelligence in terms of how, when, and why we adapt as humans. So we look at it from three aspects. So we've got our abilities, right, Chris? So that can be things like mental flexibility. Can we hold different ideas, different thoughts in our minds at the same time? We've heard a lot of talk about things like resilience or mindset with Angela Duckworth's work on grit, or Carol Dweck's on mindset. Unlearn. All of these things are skills and our abilities, and they're learnable. But that's just one component of our AQ. Second part is character, and we called it character because we wanted to step away from personality and all the personality assessments of DISC, Myers-Briggs, all of these kind of things. And that's really just to understand who and why. So, Chris, you might change and make an adaptation because you want to protect what you've got, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how, you choose to make a new change. But I need to know it. Someone else might adapt because they want to win something. They want to gain a new advantage. If I don't know that, I'm going to have friction and a mismatch in my communications, and I might get that person to change, but through compliance. So it might be short-lived or increased stress. It might be even, for example, extroversion. Introverts and extroverts. We've had a society that has long given applause to extroverts throughout careers. It's not that introverts don't adapt and extroverts do. They both adapt, but in different ways. And if we can understand that, we can give the interventions, give the training, give the support relevant to that individual. So there's a component of character. And then what we found through our research, one of the most compelling parts, our environment is so valuable. So I might have all the amazing skills. I might have a particular character profile about how I adapt and why, but when? So what environment is there? Is it, we've heard a lot about psychological safety and team support. What's my level of workplace stress? How much does my company support me? Do I have a work environment that not only the people, my line management or my bosses might give me some support, but does the processes of the company celebrate failures or not? Am I rewarded by the number of experimentations or just the outcomes? So our environment of when somebody might adapt, can I adapt when I'm under huge pressure? Can I even think straight? Or do I need huge pressure to adapt? So the environment is often left. It's not thought about. It's not measured in the same way as you would if you did an EQ or you did, IQ or various other assessments. It doesn't take into context an environment. That's really, really important for us, is across those three different areas, lots of subdimensions. And then we try and use predictive analytics to look at change readiness, reskill index, adaptable behaviors. And we use a conversational AI as part of the way the assessment's done to get more authentic results, less judgment. We can use sentiment analysis, all sorts of other things. So the research, we went about 5 years ago, getting just some really clever people together, Chris, right? Look at what research has already been done. Okay, so what is there in the top journals, peer-reviewed journals, to understand, say, resilience? So we've got the BRS, the Brief Resilience Scale. Is that robust? How, what kind of evidence behind it? Can we use and adapt an element of that? Is it relevant for our input, process, outcome kind of
as opposed to
setup?
reinventing it, trying to
as opposed to reinventing it. So about 70% of our assessment is based on existing, well-researched, peer-reviewed analysis. And a lot of that work was done with our head of research at the time, Dr. Nicholas Deschal, who's a professor at IE Business School. He's one of these interesting people that as an academic has also been on the other side. So he was a senior VP of HR at some big
nice.
organizations before he went into the academic world as a professor. So this combination of academic world, real world, HR leaders getting in over a number of years to put this assessment together, lots of well-earned money. We're a venture-backed business, and we took a couple of years to really get to understand how do people change so that we can start to then implement some targeted interventions to help people through that process of change.
Love it. You mentioned about innovation. Why is it important to celebrate failure?
That's a great question. And I think it does two things. If we are an organization that is all about the outcomes, right? And that might be explicit or not. Generally, most performance is reviewed based on getting the hitting of results and targets, sales targets, production targets of new products being launched, whatever it may be, is normally associated with the outcome result that the organization wants that links to stakeholder value. What can happen with that is it can reduce the amount of risk taking because it's all about risk mitigation because we're trying to get the outcome for it. So what happens is this celebrating of failure, they might celebrate it, but they're doing it in a limited basis because the risks in the first place are small bets, because they're outcome driven. And so organizations, the larger often they get, the less able they go through a period of, we can't make innovations, we can't really rock the boat because it might disrupt the current thing we've got. We've got to protect what we have. And that's been a continual cycle, right, of organizations that they innovate to start with, they disrupt the market in some way, and then some get really good. IBM, lots of companies have continually disrupted themselves through continual innovation by celebrating some failures, by really understanding and building a culture that is happy to not celebrate it in silos, but celebrate it not just in departments, but celebrate it as organizations. And not only celebrate, I don't mean that in a rah-rah, let's clap and well done, Chris failed at something, is that we can put it practically into our processes of how do you reward people? Are you rewarding the failure in essence, or are you rewarding the experiment? And you're rewarding the experiment to give you information that changes what you do tomorrow. So we want experiments that are fast and quick to learn early before we've gone too far in something. It's something that Astro Teller talks about, who head of what was X at Google. He talked about what are the two things you should do on this new project that are going to kill the project.
Oh, interesting.
I want to know how to kill it. Most of us orbit ourselves around how do we keep this project alive? I've got to keep justifying keeping it alive so I can keep the talent working on the project. I can keep the funding on it. Whereas he flips it completely and says, what two bits of information, if we knew it now, we would kill the project? Do those first. It's intelligent failure. It's not just cheap and fast. It's intelligent failure that we're actually celebrating, that we can learn things to then redeploy our talent or our experiments or our learning into new opportunities.
What do you see as HR's role in terms of adaptability and innovation?
They've got to take this seriously first.
Why do you say that? Why do you say, do you think they're not taking it seriously?
I think what they're doing is they are under so much pressure from so many different areas. It's very difficult to know what should I be doing. We're still really in this transition of, how do I get hybrid even working right? So there's still things that they see as very core to a problem right now. And some of these other things that come along how's that connection to my core problem? If it isn't, I need to focus on what's currently screaming, it's the squeaky wheel gets the oil. What tends to happen that I've seen is a lot of it is dealing with the symptoms, not with the root cause. They haven't got the time to deal with a root cause issue because they've got so many symptoms happening in the business. I've got to lay off people or I'm losing people I want to keep.
Let's say if we put that to one side, what should they be doing?
Once they then understand what adaptability is, they can then see how it can feed into as an undercurrent to all of those other issues and problems at a deeper root cause of how people then either change or don't change to something new, irrelevant of what that new thing is. Whether it's a new technical skill, a new product that's going in, a new owner that's bought the organization, a new merger that's happening, a new shift from a regulatory impact in healthcare, whatever it is that's going on in the industry, they're just better equipped to be able to realize that shift and change.
Yeah.
And the other big thing I think is, I would love it if a lot of the compliance stuff could be taken care of by AI, so that they're then able to work on these more complex challenges. And I think there's still a lot of HR that's dealt with that is compliance elements and what I must do and have to do about.
Is AI ready for that though, really?
I don't think it's quite ready.
I think there's a lot of bias, for example.
There is. I think there's bias in humans anyway.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Right? So we talk a lot about bias.
That's true.
And we're the ultimate bias thing anyway.
True, yeah.
Right? An individual that has bias towards liking to be in person or liking a particular style or whatever it is, because we have experience. But I feel that AI can have a much broader experience than we can as an individual. And I think the technique of AI is then in the power of, how do you want it to give you wider approaches than its bias? I've been surprised at how biased I am when I feel I'm really open-minded. And I've been using AI as like my muse to say, give me a different opinion from this viewpoint or this viewpoint or this viewpoint. And it's helped expand my thoughts for me to then make decisions with more informed areas where, I haven't lived in India and understand that. I can muse with AI to give me some viewpoints from there and shift my own biases. So I don't think AI is quite ready there yet, but I think it's going to be sudden. So where it is eating away at the heels and ankles of certain tasks, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it will be there.
I know this is a big question, but like, if you had to sort of encapsulate it, like, what does AI mean for innovation?
The way I think about it is a multiplier of whatever the intent is. So it can multiply good or bad. A pen in the hands of somebody who is bad for our future and society can be incredibly damaging, as much as it in a disruptor or a creative person can be bad or disruptive. AI, I think, what does it do for innovation? I think it multiplies the diversity. It multiplies the opportunity of creators not being linked to those that have resources. A few years ago, we saw the book, Company of One. It was talking about, we don't need to build big teams to have big impact in big companies anymore. We can use technology in ways to create unicorns and large organizations with large impacts with just one member of staff. So I think for innovation, what we're going to see using AI is a proliferation of creativity, of the imagination, of going from idea to launched app in a day, because we don't need to be a programmer. We don't need all of those resources. We can muse with a piece of AI to have a conversation and start collaborate with the marketplace. So I think this massive explosion of innovation is going to happen in the hands of individuals, i.e. the 14-year-old Indian who can code or whatever it might be. Now we just need to have an idea and have conversations with some of these technologies. And the same in education, we can learn much quicker. So in innovation, a lot of the big disruptions comes from naivety, from somebody going into something they don't understand and asking the stupid questions. Innovation now, we can ask those questions where we might have felt a bit of fear, because I don't want to seem like I'm silly. I can go and do that with an AI muse and just start to learn and see it.
Like last night, I'll give an example. Like last night, I was using there's a couple of different websites, but I was using one last night to basically build an app where you basically input what you want the app to do in text, and it automatically codes the app and builds it in real time, which is just insane.
We are just at the, whilst AI has been around for a long time, we're just at this dawn of a new era, a new age. And I know there's been a lot of talk about it, a lot of hype about it in the past. But if we just look at just over 2 billion people are suddenly about to have AI Copilot think of onboarding. If you now put all of your policies, all of your, procedures, bits in place into there, that person then doesn't have to go through this 90-day program at the beginning and all of these things and try and retain all of these complexities. When they have an issue or a question, rather than bugging their team member or somebody, oh, how do I use Slack, or what's this for, or how do I do this? They can just do it in real time with the company's policy documents added into their own layer vault that's unique to them. I think it's going to entirely shift the speed. So one of the challenges about, knowledge is it takes a long time to get them in a place where they're then valuable. And then we want to retain them, because if we leave them, we've lost all of that value and knowledge. If it's so quick to onboard and offboard, I think that transient nature then of a real portfolio of careers, a fluidity and mobility internally and externally for organizations is going to have another new awakening because of this mobilizer. So if we talk about innovation and AI, it will mobilize talent from department to department and from company to company without that same negative feel. So the concept, I think, of big layoffs or big recruitment drives or retention, I think will change the script and language of that over the next few years.
Interesting.
Because it'll be much easier to move around in various ways, that it's then about, hey, I want to hang out here for a while, and company owners, leaders being okay with that, for people to move around. That thought of, we're competing. I think competing will shift to collaboration for the companies of the future. So we'll be less about that competitive piece and more about the collaboration to solve what the world really needs. At least I hope. Anyway.
No, yeah. There's also something to be said about knowledge, right? Because retaining the knowledge and IP, because we always talk about, the knowledge walking out the door with the person. But if we're actually using AI and training the AI to kind of store all of that wealth of information from that person or those people,
becomes accessible.
Yeah.
And what the concept of knowledge in the knowledge economy was built by the fact that you'd spent years acquiring knowledge and expertise because it's relevant to apply to a new decision that you're faced today. And you can use that information to get a predictable outcome. Now, if that knowledge that we had before is less likely to predict the outcome we're going to get, what value does it have? So our view of experience and expertise and knowledge walking out the door, what we're looking at now, I think, is imagination walking out the door, not knowledge. And that's what I think we should be focusing on, is how do we harness the imagination of people, not their knowledge, because that's going to be, just again, in my opinion and my view from what we're seeing, is that that's going to be the abundant, the answers are going to be accessible and easy. We've got to imagine different things, and we want to make sure that doesn't walk out the door. So our adaptability intelligence, knowing when to stick, when to change, when to quit, how to build resilience for all of those things when we think, this is how it's going to be, and it isn't. How do we still come back with a smile and use that opportunity and support each other through that journey, is the number one thing that humanity needs to be looking at.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. So I love the way you put that as well, about the imagination walking out the door, not the knowledge. It's such a powerful, and it's such a different way of looking at it.
It's a very different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and that's where the people element comes in, like we discussed at the very beginning.
Yes.
of the podcast.
And it comes back to then, what are we training for? So we went to school, we did all of these things to then have a career.
Yeah.
That we then go and apply that career and top it up with bits of knowledge. So continual professional development around mastery. What we're now shifting to is, imagine the 5-year-old child where they are discovering new things. So I've got a pen, I can write on a wall, I can write on the sofa, I can write on a bit of paper. Parents say, not on the wall, not on the sofa, on the paper, please. Yeah. We're going to be shifting from where, oh no, it should be on the paper, back to where else can I write on the wall or on the sofa? And so training people and what the skills are required for that is a different way of thinking in the traditional structure of, you need programming. So we've got 30 million people employed as programmers. Next 5 years, that's going to entirely shift.
Well, I just proved that last night. I could write code
Yeah.
just by writing. I even had a voice assistant on one of them where I wasn't even writing. I was saying it out loud.
And the transition of how value is created today to that place on a much faster process. So the innovation killer is the heel diggerins, that are trying not to. And to be honest, where that would have had an impact won't have an impact anymore. They'll just be dead.
Yeah.
They just won't exist anymore. I think it is that profound, that different. And this is going to happen far quicker than we can even imagine it.
We've already realized that, haven't we, over the last couple of months?
But the slowest pace of change that we'll ever experience is today. Every point forward, it's always going to be faster. And we think, oh, we've experienced that already. Wow, just look at the last 6 months. That will bear into insignificance in the next 6 months, in the next 6 months. So we need to balance that also, Chris, I think, with the focus on mental fitness, that this can play havoc with our well-being physically and mentally. So how in that period can we create, rather than quiet place, how can I create quiet within me when there's a rave going on around me?
I can tell you right now, Shane and I were sitting in the office yesterday having that exact conversation of, are we going in the right direction? Should we looking at something specifically around AI? Are we missing the boat here? We're like caught between those two paradoxes. Paradoxes, but being able to hold both of those at the same time is a completely new way.
Very new way of thinking, and it's also one that can be quite challenging.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming if we don't have the language around it.
That's true.
We measure it, we give language, and then you start to build intervention. So how can I live in that space rather than saying, oh, I need to live over here or here? I remember a conversation I had with Naveen Jain. He's the billionaire who started one of his latest companies, Viome. So it's your gut health, microbiome health. It was at a conference we were both speaking at, the Success Network. And it was the conversation about balance. Insert balance into something, work-life balance, this balance. And he said, I completely fundamentally disagree with that concept of balance. And my ears pricked up and I leant in and I thought, what's he going to say here? And he said, imagine your heartbeat, all right? If it's in balance, a flat line, what does that mean? It means you're dead. He said life, and if you look at your heartbeat, it pips up and it pips down and it pips up and it pips down. If you zoom out enough, it might look like a flat line, but if you zoom in, it's incredible moments of presence in opposites. And that's a life. So I think this opportunity of what we're looking at here of utilize and improve, or explore and transform, 2 dimensions that we look at of adaptable behavior. We need incredible moments of utilize and improve what we currently have, and incredible moments of explore and transform the next piece. And that by going intensely in present to those 2 extremes regularly, how many times is our heartbeat? 60 times a minute, how can an organizational heartbeat live in the extremes of these paradoxes regularly enough that then looks like balance from behind?
Love it.
From a distance.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. with that analogy. I think of all of that, I could talk to you forever, Ross. Before I let you go, where can people learn more about you? Where can they grab a copy of the book, reach out to you directly?
So going on to AQai.io is our domain. We've actually opened up a lot of our training and certification for HR practitioners. So previously, we've got certified practitioners in about 43 countries. Our assessments being implemented in just over 2,000 organizations. So if they're interested and intrigued about their use case, how do they apply it? How do they get started? Go to AQai.io.
Amazing.
And then they can find out stuff there. And if they want to hang out with me on LinkedIn, then check me out. I'm sure we'll put it in the show notes, but Ross 100%. Thornley on LinkedIn.
And also I'll add, for anyone listening, make sure you check out the Decoding AQ podcast. We'll link all of those things in the chat. It's always a pleasure, my friend, chatting to you, and I wish you all the best until next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. That was awesome.